What if everything you thought you knew about the Garden of Eden was deliberately mistranslated? What if Adam and Eve weren't the first humans, but the first successful experiment? Tonight, we uncover the shocking truth hidden in the original Hebrew text that religious institutions have kept buried for centuries. The story begins with a single word that changes everything. In Genesis 2, verse 7, most translations read that God formed man from the dust of the ground. But the Hebrew word used is yatsar, a term that doesn't simply mean create. It means to shape, to mold, to fashion with deliberate intention. The same word used for a potter working clay or a craftsman shaping metal. This isn't divine magic. This is skilled manipulation of existing materials. But here's where it gets disturbing. The Hebrew text doesn't say God created Adam from nothing. It says he was taken, the word lakach, from the tardemah, the red earth, not created, selected, chosen from what already existed. The implications are staggering. If Adam wasn't the first human, then who came before? And why was he specifically chosen for this mysterious project? The Hebrew word gan, translated as garden, comes from the root meaning to hedge about, to protect, to defend. This wasn't a paradise. It was an enclosed facility, a controlled environment. When we examine the original text, Eden emerges not as a mystical realm, but as a sophisticated laboratory, carefully designed for a specific purpose. Picture this scene, stripped of centuries of religious interpretation. In a fertile valley between four rivers, an advanced civilization has established a research facility. The perimeter is secured, access restricted. Inside, genetic material is being manipulated, tested, refined. A being called Adam, whose name literally means red earth or blood, has been selected from the existing population. He's brought to this facility not as the first human, but as the first specimen deemed suitable for enhancement. The Hebrew text reveals something even more unsettling about Eve. Genesis 2 verse 21 states that God caused a tardemah to fall upon Adam, not sleep, but a deep, artificial unconsciousness. The same word used elsewhere in the Old Testament to describe prophetic trances and supernatural stupors. Adam wasn't resting. He was anesthetized. What follows reads like a medical procedure. The Hebrew word tsila, translated as rib, actually means side or part. An entire section of Adam's biological structure was removed and used to construct Eve. The text uses the word banah, not create or form, but build or construct. Eve wasn't born. She was assembled, built from Adam's genetic material, in what can only be described as the world's first cloning experiment. When Adam awakens and sees her, his words in Hebrew are chilling. This, at last, is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. Not wonder at a companion, but recognition of a duplicate. The Sumerian tablets tell a remarkably similar story, but with crucial details our biblical translations have obscured. The Anunnaki, to those who came down, established what they call the Garden of the Gods, in a region between rivers. Their leader, Enki, conducts genetic experiments on primitive humans, creating a hybrid workforce. The parallels are impossible to ignore. The Akkadian epic of Gilgamesh describes Enkidu being shaped from clay and placed in a protected environment. The Babylonian creation myths speak of humanity being assembled from the blood of a slain god mixed with earth. These weren't separate mythologies. They were different accounts of the same events, passed down through different cultures, gradually transformed by religious reinterpretation. The Hebrew scribes took these ancient records and wrapped them in theological language, but the original framework remained intact for those who knew how to read it. Consider the implications if this interpretation is correct. Humanity's origins aren't divine creation, but genetic manipulation by an advanced civilization. Adam and Eve weren't the first humans. They were the first successful hybrids, combining the genetics of primitive earthlings with something else entirely. The Garden of Eden wasn't paradise lost, but a research facility where the foundations of modern humanity were laid. This explains mysterious us in Genesis 1 verse 26. Let us make man in our image, not the royal we of a single deity, but the collaborative decision of a scientific team. It explains why Adam and Eve's children could find wives in the land of Nod, because there were already human populations beyond the garden's walls. It explains the forbidden tree of knowledge, not a test of obedience, but quarantine protocol to prevent the subjects from accessing information they weren't meant to have. The Hebrew word Elohim, translated as God, is grammatically plural. Throughout the Old Testament, it's used with plural verbs, suggesting multiple beings working together. When Adam and Eve eat from the tree, the Elohim say, "Behold, the man has become like one of us." Not like God, but like them, like his creators. But here's the most disturbing revelation. The Hebrew text suggests this wasn't the first attempt. The word generation in Genesis 2 verse 4, toldot, can also mean experimental procedures or developmental processes. What we're reading isn't the beginning of creation, but the successful conclusion of a series of trials. How many Adams came before? How many failed experiments were discarded before this one succeeded? The ancient texts hint at others. The Watchers mentioned in the book of Enoch. The Nephilim, the fallen ones, who bred with human women and produced giants. The mysterious sons of God, in Genesis 6, who took wives from the daughters of men. These weren't supernatural beings. They were the researchers, the genetic engineers, the ones who created Adam and Eve as the first successful human hybrids. If this interpretation is true, then every assumption about human origins must be reconsidered. We're not fallen angels cast out of paradise. We're the descendants of a genetic experiment, carrying in our DNA the legacy of both our primitive ancestors and our advanced creators. The questions this raises are profound and terrifying. Who were these Elohim? Where did they come from? And most importantly, are they still here? The Hebrew prophets speak of a time when the Elohim will return, when the kingdom of heaven will be established on earth, not a spiritual realm, but a physical restoration of the conditions that existed in the garden. The same controlled environment, the same genetic manipulation, the same hierarchical structure, with humanity serving as the hybrid workforce. But there's something else hidden in the text, a warning. The tree of life, Etz Haim, wasn't forbidden initially. Only after the consumption of knowledge did access become restricted. The Elohim feared that their creations might take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Immortality wasn't a gift to be given, but a threat to be prevented. What exactly was in that tree? And why were the creators so desperate to keep it from their creations? The answer may lie in the word nakal, inheritance. The tree of life wasn't just about longevity. It was about accessing the full genetic potential locked within the hybrid DNA, the complete activation of abilities that had been deliberately suppressed. The Elohim didn't create servants. They created potential competitors. And they knew it. As we've seen tonight, the Garden of Eden wasn't the beginning of human history. It was the beginning of human control. Adam and Eve weren't the first humans. They were the first successful attempts at creating a manageable hybrid species. The implications of this revelation extend far beyond theology into the very nature of human consciousness, our genetic potential, and our ultimate destiny. But this is only the beginning. Next time, we'll explore the most disturbing question of all. If the Elohim genetically modified early humans to create us, what did they modify us from? And what happened to the original human species that existed before the garden? The answer lies hidden in the blood sacrifices, the genetic prohibitions, and the mysterious covenant that bound humanity to its creators. The truth about our origins isn't just hidden in ancient texts. It's written in our DNA. And some secrets, once revealed, can never be buried again.